If you're watching this video just to dislike it, just because I'm saying bad stuff about a show that you like, then shoot, get out of here. For those willing to hear me out, then you should know that I like Family Guy. Old or modern, I've always liked it. I've already done a best episodes video and a best songs video, which both consist of almost only praise. Plus my video on the banned episodes was me pretty much just defending the show, saying that the episodes that were banned don't really warrant being banned. Why only 5, you may be asking? Well, that's because even though I believe I could make this a top 10 list, I think it would become tedious, since it's likely episodes 6 through 10 would just be me saying, boring. In terms of bad episodes, these are just my least favourites, but I do think more episodes of Family Guy are bad.
Oh god, it's all watery.
I find a lot of episodes of Family Guy boring, but I think that's typically because the jokes aren't compatible with me finding them funny. Usually those episodes I find dull at least offer a fair variety in terms of jokes. This has some variety, but if you don't find the gross out used in this episode funny, then this episode will probably be one of the worst episodes for you too. The B-plot with Peter and the group getting kicked out of their booth at the bar isn't bad, just a bit dull, but has a few decent moments in there. The gross out really doesn't gross me out, which is kind of the problem. Even if I hated the gross out jokes and was grossed out, then it'd still be getting a reaction out of me. But with this, I feel nothing.
Wow! 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 Wow!
Chip is annoying.
Hey everybody!
But that's not why this is one of my least favourite episodes. While my main flaw with this episode is connected to his annoyance, my flaw isn't with Chip himself. My main flaw is with the family around Chip. Chip is annoying, so why is it that the family just chooses to ignore that? They might just be being nice, but that just seems out of character for most of them. I don't actually mind that the family like him that much, I just hate that Peter likes him at first and then the episode just turns into jealousy, as he finds that his family like Chip more than him. I find it hard to describe what I dislike about this one, but a bunch of things just irritate me, and it really isn't Chip's voice. It's probably how dumb it all really is. This is just a point of too stupid and too pointless, I think. That mixed with the family being out of character and the generic jealousy plot just makes this an episode that I dislike.
Hey, Peter.
Jeez, Quagmire, you look terrible.
I didn't get any sleep.
While abusive relationships is / are a sensitive subject, I do think that you can make that funny, which could work for an episode, a la South Park's elementary school musical episode.
Kids these days.
Kids these days!
I also think that you could treat the topic seriously and with respect, and that could work for an episode too, a la the entire season 21 of South Park. Family Guy seems to try both at the same time, and it falls flat on its face at both. The first half of the episode seems to be treating the situation seriously, with some jokes thrown in. Granted, it isn't even a kind of subtle abusive relationship, which is how most abusive relationships are, but it treats the topic kind of seriously. It fails at how to treat it seriously though. It gives the intervention to the abused rather than the abuser, and just seems like it's blaming the abused. Joe is also the most out of character I think he's ever been in the show in this episode, not helping just because Brenda doesn't go to the police herself. This could just be contributed to lazy or poor writing, but when you give that writing to a character, it can make that character come across as a dick, if it's something that characters should know about, but just doesn't because of the writing. The second half of the episode becomes a let's treat this episode with more comedy than seriousness, I think. If they were still going for seriousness at that point, then it was completely lost, at least on me. The group go to kill him. Jeff, the abuser. This guy. Including Joe, which once again, irritating, because he chooses to help Quagmire kill the guy, rather than just arrest him earlier on. I think a lot of people really hated the letter part of this episode too, but I didn't think that part was too bad. My problem with the episode is really that when it tries to be serious, it gives the wrong message, and then when it tries to be funny, it fails, because it's so often trying to be serious.
Listen, Jeff, just put the gun down and we'll forget this whole thing, okay? Oh. Well, that's never happened before. Kinda don't know what to do next.
I think that the clown porn at the beginning of the episode is pretty funny, and I also liked a rock lobster. So, some decent cutaways in this episode at the very least. I think Quagmire saying I choke myself every day could have been funny if half of the stuff in this episode wasn't trying to be serious. It's a shame they wasted Caitlin Olsen in this episode, as I find her very funny. Most of this show's characters struggle to be serious. The concept as a whole just doesn't work well with Family Guy. It's just an episode of Family Guy that they should have avoided making.
You're disrespecting our entire culture.
And why did Wes Anderson come here to make his worst movie?
Stewie, what do we do?
Quick, hit the red buttons!
Wow, that came in handy.
Yeah.
Now
And
let's get
see what
out of
their
here.
wieners look like. No, let's get out of here.
As a whole, I adore the Road to series of episodes in Family Guy. There are even episodes that I think would work under the Road to name that aren't considered Road to episodes. This doesn't deserve the Road to name. This is easily my least favourite Road to episode. And while I could be ultra critical on every episode in their own right, and I kind of am, the reason that this is so high up on my list is because I was insanely disappointed with this episode. It has the Road to name but doesn't even try to follow the typical structure of a Road to episode. It has a damn B-plot with Peter and Joe. No. That doesn't belong in the Road to series of episodes. The B-plot itself might not bother me so much if it or the main plot were at least good. The main plot is just another Brian relationship episode, with a ton of Indian jokes sprinkled in there, and almost all of those jokes fall flat for me too. And the B-plot is just a relatively normal B-plot with Peter being an ass. It doesn't feel like a grand Stewie and Brian adventure, it just feels like a regular episode, and not a good one. This episode is really hated by a lot of people. I don't like this episode, I didn't find it funny, and the episode sides with the villain trying to make her, Angela, the good guy or the victim. If the episode was just joking around about how men supposedly can't get sexually assaulted, then this episode could work. But that is portrayed as the moral, and I don't sense any sarcasm or see much satire in there. The episode is just really unclear on whether it's being serious with the men can't get sexually assaulted angle. This is probably number 6. I didn't realise this before I started to work on this video, but season 12 is my least favourite season of Family Guy. This episode doesn't seem to be too hated, but I tend to watch through a season of a single show, then move on to either the next season or a season of a different show. I used to wait for seasons of shows to finish on TV so that I could later binge watch them on DVD. When first watching through the season I was already getting bored, but this episode made me slow down when watching through the season, because I just became so incredibly bored. I don't find the episode where Brian comes back that bad, because I knew it was going to happen. The episode where Brian dies, however, was so clearly used to drag in viewers, and if for some reason that wasn't the case, then I have no idea what they wanted to achieve with this. Brian's death itself is kind of sad, but not really, because of how many jokes are thrown in so soon after he dies. I don't think that this is one of the worst episodes, but now Brian's back it's just become pointless to watch as no character got any development from this. It also doesn't help that almost everybody that truly cared about Brian's death knew that he would be back, since you could just check the wiki and see that there was an episode called Brian's a Bad Father set to air later in the same season. Speaking of which, this episode is hated for a few reasons. Brian's a dick like he usually is, Peter's a dick like he usually is, yet somehow the episode makes the two of them even less likable than they usually are. I don't really mind the two of them being dicks as long as I find the episode funny, because at this point the characters are just there for jokes and not consistency. The main reason this episode's really hated though is because of the suicide joke, and a joke about the Family Guy audience earlier in the episode. Yes, those jokes are awful when you connect them together, and even when not connecting the jokes together I didn't find either of them funny. And not because I was offended, they just fell flat with me. The episode as a whole fell flat for me, though I was kind of glad to see Quagmire shoot Peter in the head. Incest! Good, I got your attention. When I hear most people talk about this episode, I hear them say how disgusting they find this episode. Incest is disgusting. But this episode doesn't treat it seriously. When an episode isn't trying to be serious, I simply can't hate it as much as an episode that tries to be serious and fails with its message, unless it's humorless. This is by no means an amazing episode, but this is also nowhere near the worst for me either. Bestiality. Good, I got your attention. Us millennials need buzzwords to pay attention to things. We're so terrible at paying attention to things after all. Apparently. Stewie and Brian have babies. It's nowhere near as bad as it sounds. I wouldn't even say this episode's bad, I just think it's a bit dull. There's some gross stuff in here, but nothing that bothered me. I hear some people say that this is the worst episode, but I just don't see it. I actually think this is just average in terms of quality. Like, really, really average. And the award for the crappiest episode goes to... Seahorse, Seashell Party. There was never a doubt in my mind which episode would be the cream of the crop of dumpster fires. The king of all that is terrible with Family Guy. Seahorse, Seashell Party. Where do I begin? I think I'll start by saying this episode isn't special despite being kind of hyped up. Family Guy, American Dad, and The Cleveland Show all had a hurricane-based episode that was actually set to the timeline of the airing order of these shows. It was known as The Night of the Hurricane. The Cleveland Show started with an okay episode, Family Guy had this awful episode, and it ended with American Dad, which is why the crossover between the three dads is in American Dad. There are two main problems infecting this episode. It's dull and it has a truly terrible message at the end. Most of this episode was just filled with nothingness, until Meg finally snaps, tearing apart Chris, Lois, and Peter one by one. That stuff would be acceptable, I suppose, if Family Guy had continuity, but that wouldn't even matter, because they reverse it all at the end. Meg thinks the family needs a punching bag to function, and decides to be that punching bag, because sometimes it is needed. Brian agrees. Not only is that a horrible lesson, which I'd be fine with if it didn't seem so serious, but it erases all of the potential character development from earlier, turning kind of redeemable stuff from the episode into a gigantic, pointless snore. Ugh. This also fails to work because Meg getting abused has been portrayed as comedy for so long. Going against seasons worth of that stuff only makes this episode seem even more pointless. Oh, and stupid. Ugh. For the record, them using abuse as comedy for so long is also why the Brenda episode fails. There's also a B-plot with Brian getting addicted to mushrooms. Visually interesting, unlike the main plot, and I enjoyed Stewie taking care of Brian, but it's still one of the most dull Stewie and Brian plots to date. I do think it's important to mention though that the latest couple of seasons of Family Guy have been a big improvement. The current season is actually one of the best and most creative seasons in years, and while I do dislike these episodes, I don't dislike anyone involved in making them. I just think that there were some mess-ups along the way. It must be hard to come up with episodes for a show that now has more than 300 episodes under its belt. I hope I wasn't too cruel on these episodes. I don't think I was. I want to stress that no episode of a cartoon is capable of making me angry. So while I was critical, especially over that last episode, it didn't make me angry. Be sure to let me know which episodes of Family Guy are your least favourites in the comments. Oh, and there is one huge bright side to Seashell Party. The hurricane caused one of American Dad's best episodes to date.